said a lot of things. And yeah, I mean, one of the things he did very quickly was increase the deficit. But that's not the kind of leadership we need right now.
Pete Buttigieg, who is really good on his feet and is not afraid to go to quote-unquote unfriendly news platforms, is on Local News Live, which I have never heard of in this clip. It kind of caught my attention because it does seem so off the beaten path. But Pete Buttigieg does what he does best, which is take complicated issues, break them down to their relatively straightforward core, and talk about it sensibly, despite this host's attempts to seem sort of middle of the road. I mean, I think we see that it's a right-wing bias pretty quickly. You'll see it as we watch. But why don't we check it out together? I'll have some opinions, and then I want to know what you think about it in the comments.
Democrats fell out of step with voters on immigration under the Biden years, arguably opening the door for President Trump's big crackdown now. How do Democrats reshape their immigration policy and their messaging on this?
Look, I was part of the last administration. I do believe that there should have been action quicker and a more immediate understanding of how important it was to deal with the issues at the border. But I will also say that President Biden's executive action changed all of that. I think the Democratic Party now needs to take a hard look at why there's been so much concern around the border for many years and what it would take to have true immigration reform.
In 2019, you said you supported decriminalizing illegal border crossings. Is that still your position?
You know, I view that differently now that I saw the extreme pressure that border communities faced in the years since. There's a lot of things that look different about a decade later, and this is one of them.
Just real quick, one thing that you saw Mayor Pete Buttigieg do here is admit that he's changed his mind. And whether or not he frames it as I was wrong, he's like, I evolved. I went and I saw the pressure that these border communities are facing, and it's changed my position on this. And I have never heard a MAGA Republican say anything that even approaches that.
Americans are often frustrated by the slow and ineffective pace of government, but Donald Trump and the Republicans seem to be getting things done very quickly. The president has already delivered on many of his campaign promises. How do you counter that?
Well, doing something quickly is not the same as doing the right thing. He came in, said he was going to cut prices on day one. Instead, prices went up when he started talking about tariffs on day one. Said he was going to bring peace to the Middle East on day one. Instead, there is even more chaos and violence there. Said a lot of things. And yeah, I mean, one of the things he did very quickly was increase the deficit. But that's not the kind of leadership we need right now. We all want decisive action. We want decisive action that will actually do some good in everyday life. And so far, the biggest priority has been tax cuts for billionaires. They can be very decisive and quick when it comes to that. Not so much when it comes to solving the problems that everyday Americans are actually facing in daily life around here, like the cost of goods.
And of course, the very important subtext that Mayor Pete does not voice here is that it is because they do not care. They don't care about average Americans. This billionaire and his cabinet of billionaires care about billionaires. Full stop.
Looking ahead to the midterms now, many of the deepest cuts from this big, beautiful bill don't take effect until after the midterms, especially for Medicaid and SNAP. Do you think that makes it harder for Democrats to message? What should the strategy be?
Yeah, I think Republicans really showed their hand here by timing a lot of the worst health care cuts to come just after the election when they will be held accountable. But I don't think that changes the message. In fact, if anything, I think it adds urgency. It means the message will be that you may lose your health care or your food support or other community things you count on very soon after the election if we don't turn things around, if we don't get a different Congress and different leadership that will say, wait a minute, it's not okay to kick more than 10 million Americans off their health insurance.
Absolutely. And I don't need to go on a Bernie Sanders screed here, but don't we want minimum wage to be coming up instead of staying stagnant? Don't we want services to improve? Don't we want our tax money going towards programs that are going to make life better for average Americans? It doesn't feel like any of that is happening to me.
There's some new reporting just out from Axios saying that Democrats, the Democratic base, Democratic voters really want to see some more action from their leaders. They really want politicians to get down and dirty, to kind of stoop down to the level that they say Republicans are going. Do you believe that should kind of be the approach? Do you want to see Democrats get feistier?
Well, I think it's really important to pick good, tough fights and fight them well. That doesn't mean emulating Republicans or emulating the president's tendency to lie or break promises or somehow try to trick American voters. I do think it means going out into places where Democrats haven't been seen in a long time and not just explaining what we're against, but what we're for, making it clear how everyday life could be better if we were given a chance to deliver on things like expanded access to health care, paid family leave, higher pay and wages, and a lot of other things that most Americans agree with us need to happen.
I agree that if it were to become a race to the bottom, that doesn't serve anybody, right? If we let it just become a knife fight, the way the Republicans seem to want to do it, we abandon the best of the ideals that we hold for this country. That being said, I do think, and I certainly feel, that we want from the left, from our Democratic Party, we want them to roll up their sleeves and get in there, right? It feels fairly toothless in its response. And one example is when we do have power, we can't be so tentative and moderate. I think one of the criticisms I have of Obama was that he constantly tried to get bipartisan buy-in on everything, and that was just such an albatross around his neck. They're not operating in good faith. They're operating as though this is a war. And I don't know how you effectively collaborate with a party that is treating it like a war when you're trying to, make compromises. It's just not a lesson that Democrats seem to be learning. They're not operating in good faith. It's rip and run. And we're just sort of being like, well, if we get back in power, maybe we can do something. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it.
Elon Musk just announced he is going to launch a third party here in America, or another party. What do you make of his promise now to maybe hold some politicians accountable? He says we live under a one-party system. Do you think that his new party will have any effect?
Well, look, I think the more the merrier as far as our political landscape. I think a lot of Americans are frustrated with the two-party system. I haven't yet heard what the kind of central idea of his party would be. But I do think it's really interesting that so many different sides of the political spectrum are outraged over this bill. Whether you're a Democrat who's upset about the tax cuts for the rich, or whether you're someone like Elon Musk who's upset about the enormous increases in the deficit, all of them are further indications that this administration and definitely this Congress are just wildly out of step with what most Americans want to see.
That's 100% true. I mean, there has been some messaging I've seen on Pete Buttigieg that he's too corporate, that he's not passing purity tests from the left. I still admire the man for his intelligence, for his calm, for his ability to speak clearly. And I think, whether it's just rhetoric or not, speak towards this idea of governance that is about the government is supposed to make life better for all Americans, right? The average Americans, and of which I count myself one, right? I think that what's really interesting here, this local news live, never heard of this network. They've got this kind of stuff shirt. He's basically sort of spewing right-wing talking points in a watered-down, reasonable-sounding way, and I think it's just part of a big sane-washing, normalizing strategy. It's like, well, hey, I mean, President Trump's delivering on his promise to herd all the people into camps. How do you feel about that? Or what do you think Democrats should do? It's not normal, right? These efforts to turn this into a police state, that's not normal. And you see again and again attempts to sort of, whether it's the Joe Rogans or the Theo Vaughns, or it's guys like this local news live anchor, there's just this attempt to be like, well, I mean, hey, modern times, right? He's doing what he said he was going to do. It's just sane washing. It's just, hey, everybody get used to this, get used to this, get used to this. So then when it really gets down to the bone, you don't have the impetus to leap out of your seats and do anything about it. And believe me, I don't want to do that either, right? I mean, we've had it so relatively comfortable for so long that the idea that we now have taken it all for granted and we have to stand up and actually fight to protect this democracy that we've all been living in before it evaporates under these oligarchs. And it's not just an exhausting thought, it's a terrifying thought, right? I just want things to be better again. And I understand that if it bleeds, it leads, right? Bad news sells more than good news. And there is good news. There is interesting stuff going on in science, and you know, the world is never all good or all bad. But it's sobering and it's depressing. And you know, I was watching another video on here where somebody had framed it that he thought this last election was basically less than the Democrats versus the Republicans. It was the corporatists, or the Democrats, versus the oligarchs, or the Republicans, and that the oligarchs have won, and that the corporatists at least valued decorum and stability, and the oligarchs actually felt that, you know, destabilizing things works to their benefit because one of the main goals is to privatize everything, take away these things like the post office and, you know, social safety nets, and privatize them so you can jack up the prices and reduce the quality of service, which we see again and again. And I mean, as depressing and cynical as that view is, I was like, I'm having difficulty pricking holes in it. That also speaks to the dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party and the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers, who seem beholden to being, you know, clinging tightly to like, no, we need to be able to trade stocks while we're in office. And no, well, we have to, you know, we continue to support Israel and bow to AIPAC and things like that. And I'm just kind of like, what about us, man, living out here in the streets? Where are all of our tax dollars are going? To military expansion and ICE expansion and funding Israeli bombs in Gaza and on and on and on. You got to cut Medicaid. You got to kill PBS. You got to cut, you know, CDC research. What is happening? It's just absolutely bonkers. So one of the things I like about Pete Buttigieg is he speaks calmly and clearly. But I think, you know, watch this again. The news anchor's not listening to him. Pete Buttigieg isn't changing this guy's mind. I feel like more and more these videos I do where it's a debate or a conversation, one side is trying, you know, the liberal side is basically trying to make their point and change minds and shine the light of clarity on it. Like, oh, can't you see? And the other side is just not interested. The other side is being paid to sane wash and normalize. And if they can make, you know, the liberal look upset, like in some of these Anna Kasparian videos we've seen recently about Gaza, where she just loses it, so much the better, because then they can point and laugh at, haha, look at these, you know, snowflakes losing it. And it's incredibly cynical. But maybe I'm just in a bad mood. You know, maybe I've got low blood sugar. Why don't you let me know in the comments? Cheer me up in the comments if you can.